to welcome you all to our Summer Bridge series. Today's session is going to be focused on change management, and it features Curated Automation's Traci Cuthbertson. During the session today, Traci is going to share her very disciplined yet practical approach to change management. It is the result of her deep and broad experience across multifunctional organizational change. And she'll share how some of it has come from the positives and some of the not so positives of managing change. By the end of the session today, I think you're going to have such a good framework, a clear framework to prepare yourself, support yourself, enable, and drive the adoption that's really key to working in new elevated ways. Please introduce yourself, and we're so excited to get into your content today.
Hi, thank you, Christina. I am Traci Cuthbertson. I'm Director of Knowledge and Learning here at Curated Automation. And as Christina mentioned, I also have a background in change management and I've spent a lot of my career helping organizations and their employees make sense of workplace changes, especially when they involve new technology. So I'm really excited to be here today and share some of what I've learned over the years. As organizations continue to make the leap to cloud technologies like Smartsheet, the need to effectively manage the people side of change has never been more crucial. Because if you look at the top reasons why technology projects fail, the majority of those reasons are people related. And so for today's session, I want to share with you a simple framework and a few strategies that can help you reduce your people risk when you're implementing Smartsheet or any other new technology for the first time, as well as when you're rolling out enhancements and optimizations, it will apply to those situations as well. So this is a framework that I created based on my many years of experience working in technology change management. And it was designed to help identify and remove those friction points in your project before they become a barrier to adoption. So if we move on to the next screen, you can see that the framework itself is called PEEP. And PEEP is going to represent each of the letters that make up the foundational elements of this framework. So there's a letter P at the beginning, and then there's a letter P at the end, and they represent the platform and the process aspects of a project. So in this case, the platform would be Smartsheet, and the processes would be things like the workflows and the automations that have been built in. Things like how to set up a project or how to track a request or some other operational process. So together, the platform and the processes, they make up the end pieces of the framework because that's the container in which the technology change is happening. And these are typically the things that get the most focus in a project. But for today's session, I really want to focus on that group in the middle, and that's the people. And the people, they are represented by those 4 E's. And so in order to bring your platform or your processes to life, you want to activate people power using experience, expectations, education, and empathy. Okay. So let's get started. We'll start with experience. So creating a delightful, seamless experience for your users is one of the best things that you can do to drive user adoption when you're introducing technology. And it goes without saying, one of the things you don't want to do is make it hard for your users to use the system. You don't want to overcomplicate it. You don't want to add unnecessary steps. Instead, what you want to do is focus on things like simplifying and streamlining. You'll also want to invest in developing things like dashboards so that you can surface up relevant information to your users at a glance. And you also want to consider automation when you have repeatable steps and whenever that's possible and it makes sense. You'll also want to prioritize the user experience by putting it at the heart of your overall design process. You want to make it a practice to embed some of the principles of human-centered design, starting at the very beginning of your project. And then as you continue to move on, you want to also be intentional about always using those principles to remove that friction for your users. Another way that you can improve that user experience is to not just focus on highlighting the individual features and functions of the platform that you're rolling out, but rather what you want to do is you want to tell relevant user stories about how that technology is going to be embedded in their flow of work. And as you're developing these stories, just keep in mind that the main characters in these stories should be the people, your users, and not the platform. So don't just make it about the platform features and functions. The next E is for expectations and the importance of having clear expectations for your users. So it's been my experience when I work with a lot of different clients that what often looks like resistance to change from your users on the surface, if you take a closer look at it, it actually is uncertainty and not resistance. And that uncertainty will happen if the dots between the technology and the flow of work have not been connected for your users. And so that leaves them speculating about how this change is going to fit within their new job responsibilities. Now, you may be familiar with the phrase that clear is kind. And for your users in this situation, being clear about those expectations for them is not only kind, but it's also empowering because it removes that uncertainty, which then helps them better be able to embrace their new normal. And then also keep in mind that setting clear expectations about new technology, it actually starts with getting alignment across your organization and making sure that everyone is clear on what are their roles, what are their responsibilities with the new platform. And then this also needs to be coupled with consistent messaging from your leadership. And then you want to follow up with coaching for your users from their direct managers on what their day-to-day focus and focus should be on these things. And then once you get alignment across the organization, you want to make sure that you have things in place to keep everyone on the same page about these expectations. And so that could look like documenting and reflecting the expectations in your policies, in your practices, in your procedures. Because if those expectations are not there, then it may begin to contradict each other, which also creates additional friction points. So let's move on to education. Our next E. Users are more likely to be resistant to a change when they don't feel prepared for it. And so this is where education comes in. Education is not just training. Yes, it's inclusive of training, but it's actually broader than that. And it represents the umbrella of all the things that you can do to help your users feel prepared to interact with the platform at Go Live and beyond. So yes, depending on the complexity of the change, it's going to be very likely that your users will need some initial training to help them get comfortable. They'll need to learn the basics. They'll need to learn how to navigate. They'll need to learn all of the keystrokes that they need to take to get their work done. And so while this initial training is crucial, it's important to keep in mind that it's just the beginning of your user's educational journey to get smarter about using the technology. That initial training, those concepts are going to need to be reinforced over and over again to make that change sticky so that your users don't fall back into those bad habits or find workarounds or just generally be frustrated by the system. And again, that's going to create friction and more resistance. So you want to make sure that you're addressing those things. And then the last thing about education that I want to call out is that education is also inclusive of providing end user support and making sure that your users know how to access that support for them. Ideally, you'll be able to provide some self-support tools such as job aids or videos or knowledge-based articles. These are often referred to as tier 0 activities. But the goal here is that you want to help users learn to help themselves. And then in those instances where they can't self-resolve something, then you want to make sure they know what is the path to escalate and get to those higher support tiers so that they can get the help they need to move on and feel prepared. And then finally, there's empathy. Empathy in this situation when we're talking about projects is this ability to take on another person's perspective and being able to put yourself in their shoes, put yourself in the user's shoes. Empathy is important in these types of projects because even though you may think of them as only an IT project, when you peel back the layers, what you will find that is actually a people project at its core. And if you think about people, people are humans. They're going to have human emotions. They're going to have human situations and human mindsets. And if these things are not addressed within the context of the project, again, it's going to create that negative fiction, that negative friction, and it's going to impact your ability to achieve those desired adoption levels. And as we all know, without full adoption from your people, then you're not going to be able to fully maximize your expected returns. So if you're asking yourself, how do I remove the friction points and bring empathy into my project without making it feel like a kumbaya session? One of the ways you can do that is by just simply answering that question that all your users want to know, and that is, what's in it for me, right? We sometimes refer it to as with them. So for each of your stakeholder groups, you'll want to make sure that you have a clear value proposition as to why they should be investing their time, their energy, their focus in supporting this change and learning this new technology. Empathy in a project can also look like recognizing change fatigue, and then knowing when your users have hit a wall and you may need to take a pause on all of the change. And then also it's just acknowledging that sometimes there are some emotional attachments to the old way of doing things. Even if those old ways were clunky or hard, people still have attachments to them and they need to be recognized. And then finally, you can embed empathy into your projects by ensuring that the voice of the user doesn't get lost with all the other things that are going on. And you can help by elevating the voice of your users in your project by giving it an owner, having someone responsible for it, putting it on your project plan, putting some accountability around it, and then making sure you're measuring the outcomes because, as the saying goes, what gets measured gets done. And so, yeah, there you have it. That's the PEEP process or the PEEP framework. And the intent is that when you have technology and processes that you want to roll out, that you want to leverage your people power in your organization to help bring it to life. So I hope that you found the information in this session to be useful. And if so, please share with others. And if you're interested in learning more about how you can minimize friction and maximize benefits on your next project, reach out to us and let's continue the conversation.
Oh, Tracy, this was great. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I know we have talked before about how important that those E's are in really kind of operationalizing change in your organization and even in our personal lives. So I really appreciate your insights. And I want to thank also our audience today for joining. And again, if you have any questions, we really invite you to reach out to us here at Curated Automation. Everybody have a lovely day.